Noticed something was wrong the moment my daughter-in-law walked into my kitchen and opened the refrigerator without saying a word to me. Not hello. Not good morning. She just walked in like it was her house. I was standing right there at the counter, still in my housecoat, coffee in hand. She pulled open the fridge door so wide it nearly knocked the fruit bowl off the counter, grabbed the orange juice. My orange juice, the kind I drive to Publix specifically to buy because it has the extra pulp, and poured herself a full glass. Then she put the carton back without checking if there was any left for me. There wasn't. I stood there holding my empty mug and thought, when did this start? When did I stop being a person in my own home and become just furniture? My name is Frances. I'm 68 years old. I live in a 3-bedroom house in Savannah, Georgia that my late husband Walter and I bought in 1987. We paid it off together. We repainted the porch together. We planted the magnolia tree in the backyard that is now taller than the roof. When Walter passed 6 years ago, I stayed. This is my home. Every corner of it holds something of his, something of mine, something of ours. My son is named Joel. No, wait, my son's name is not in that story yet. Let me back up. My son Emmett has always been the kind of man who means well but bends like a reed in the wind. He's 42 years old, works in logistics for a freight company out of Charleston, drives an hour each way every day. I'm proud of him for that. The driving alone would break most people. He never complains about it. What he does do is come home and repeat whatever his wife said to him that day, as though it came from his own head. He married Rochelle 3 years ago. I want to be fair when I talk about her. She's not a cruel person, I don't think. She's ambitious, and she grew up comfortable, and she has never quite understood the difference between what a person earns and what a person is given. When Emmett first brought her to meet me, she walked through my house the way people walk through an open house, appraising, not admiring. She paused in the hallway in front of the framed photos and said, "You have a lot of stuff." She wasn't being rude. That's the thing. She genuinely didn't understand that what she called stuff was my life. The first year they were married, Emmett called me about a car payment. He didn't ask exactly. He started with the weather, then moved to how tired Rochelle had been, then mentioned that her lease was up on her Audi and the new one was coming in higher than expected. And somehow, by the end of the conversation, I had agreed to cover the difference for 3 months while they sorted things out. I told myself it was a one-time thing. The second time it was their security deposit, when they moved to a bigger apartment in Mount Pleasant, a nicer neighborhood closer to Rochelle's yoga studio. I wired the money on a Tuesday morning and felt, briefly, the way you feel when you've done something generous. Good, warm, useful. By the 4th and 5th time, a dental bill Rochelle's insurance didn't fully cover, then a weekend trip they couldn't quite afford but had already booked. I had stopped feeling warm. I felt like a drawer they opened when they needed something. I never said that out loud. I was raised not to. They moved into my house 14 months ago. Emmett's company restructured. His hours were cut, not dramatically, but enough that their rent in Mount Pleasant became a real strain. Rochelle had recently left her job at a marketing firm. She was, as she explained to me at length over Sunday dinner, taking a beat to reassess her professional direction. She had plans for a wellness consulting business. She'd been researching it for months. I told them they could stay with me while they stabilized. 6 months, maybe 8. It made sense. The house has 3 bedrooms. I was here alone. I thought it might even be nice having family under the same roof again. What I did not anticipate was what family under the same roof would come to mean. Within the first month, Rochelle had reorganized my pantry. She said she was trying to help, and maybe she was, but she moved things I'd kept in the same places for 30 years and then looked at me with that patient smile when I couldn't find the paprika. She started having groceries delivered to the house and charging them to a shared card Emmett had added me to, not asking, just adding, and the first time I saw the bill, I sat down at the kitchen table and stayed there for a long time. Organic everything. Specialty items. Sparkling water by the case. The bill was twice what I spent on my own. I brought it up once. Rochelle said she was mindful about what she put in her body, and that she hoped I could understand. Emmett looked at the table. I understood. I just didn't think I was the one who should be paying for it. I want to tell you about a Saturday in October. My neighbor Harriet had invited me to her granddaughter's birthday lunch. One of those easy, cheerful afternoons at a restaurant on River Street. Nothing fancy. Just a table full of women laughing and eating fried shrimp. I had been looking forward to it for 2 weeks. I came home at 4 in the afternoon carrying a small box of leftover birthday cake that Harriet had pressed into my hands, and I walked into my own kitchen to find Rochelle standing at my stove. I thought she was cooking dinner. I was touched, honestly. I set down my purse and said something like, "That smells wonderful. What is it?" She said, "Oh, it's just for us tonight. I made enough for Emmett and me." Then she turned back to the stove. I stood in the doorway of my own kitchen for a moment. The pot she was using was mine. The stove was mine. The kitchen was mine. I looked in the refrigerator and found a container of leftover pasta from 2 nights before, the kind that had already separated and gone a little stiff. I heated it up. I sat at my own dining table and ate it alone while Rochelle and Emmett had dinner together in front of the television. Through the doorway, I could see the steam rising off their plates. I could smell the garlic. I ate my cold pasta and I did not say a word. But something shifted in me that evening, something quiet and permanent, like a door closing softly in a house. The next morning, I called my friend Dolores. Dolores and I have known each other since our children were in elementary school. She lost her husband 2 years before I lost Walter, and we have spent a great deal of time on each other's porches over the years, drinking sweet tea and telling each other the truth. "Frances," she said after I had told her everything, "you know what you're doing, right?" I asked her what she meant. "You're making yourself small so nobody has to feel uncomfortable. You've been doing it for a year." I told her I didn't want to cause problems. She said, "You're already in a problem. You're just the only one pretending you're not." I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. Things came to a head on a Thursday evening in November. Emmett had come home from work, and I had actually cooked that night, a real dinner. Pot roast in the slow cooker, the way Walter used to love it, with potatoes and carrots, and the herbs from the little pots I keep on the windowsill. I had set the dining table with 3 places. I realize now, trying to make things feel normal, trying to feel like a family. We sat down together. It was nice for about 4 minutes. Then Rochelle mentioned, in that breezy way she had, that she had signed up for a retreat, a 5-day wellness retreat in Asheville, run by someone whose name I didn't recognize, cost unspecified but implied to be significant. She was very excited about it. She talked about it the way you talk about something you've already decided. I asked when it was. She said next month. I asked carefully how they were planning to cover it. There was a pause. Emmett looked at his pot roast. Rochelle looked at me with that patient smile and said that they were a little stretched right now and that she'd been hoping I might be willing to help out. Just this once, since it was really important for her well-being and her business development. Just this once. I counted, quietly, in my head, the car payment, the security deposit, the dental bill, the vacation, the groceries for 14 months, the sparkling water by the case. I said I'd think about it. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in my bed in the dark and listened to the house and thought about Walter, about the years we spent building something together, about the magnolia tree in the backyard that neither of us expected to outlive him. I thought about my mother, who worked as a seamstress her whole life and left me a modest inheritance that I had been careful with, that I had added to over time, that I had always thought of as something to pass forward. I thought about the word well-being, and I thought, mine counts too. I got up before 5. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table in the quiet and I wrote things down. Not dramatically. I'm not a dramatic person. Just a list. What I had contributed in the past 14 months, what my actual monthly costs were before they arrived, what my savings look like now versus then, what I had originally planned to leave behind for Emmett and someday for his children if they ever had any. The numbers were clarifying in the way cold water is clarifying. Then I called my attorney. Her name is Margaret. She's been my attorney for 11 years. She has a no-nonsense voice, and she does not waste time. I told her I wanted to talk about my estate documents. I told her I wanted to make sure everything was structured correctly. I told her I had some concerns. She said she could see me Friday morning. I drove to her office on a cool Friday with the windows down a little, enough to feel the air. Savannah in November has a particular quality to it. The leaves are just starting to turn, the heat is finally broken, and everything smells faintly of the river. I parked on the street and sat for a moment before going in. Inside, Margaret had coffee ready. She is the kind of attorney who listens without interrupting, which is rarer than it should be. I told her everything. Not just the finances, all of it. The orange juice, the pantry, the cold pasta. She nodded. Do you want to protect what you have, she said, or do you want to change who benefits from it? I said I wanted both. We talked for 2 hours. By the time I left, we had a plan. My home would be placed in a revocable living trust with provisions she helped me structure carefully. Emmett was still named as a beneficiary. He is my son and I love him. But the arrangement no longer left anything open to the kind of drift that had been happening. There were conditions attached to the trust that were clear and reasonable. The financial support I had been providing informally would end in writing. I also set up a separate account that I would not be adding Emmett to. I didn't feel angry when I did any of this. I felt, strangely, like myself. Like I had found the thing I had set down somewhere and forgotten. I did not tell Emmett right away. I went home, made lunch, watered the plants on the windowsill. Rochelle was in her room on a call. I could hear her talking about her business plan through the closed door. Emmett got home at 7, ate the leftover pot roast I'd reheated, and told me about his day. I listened. I asked questions. I was his mother. But that night I called my granddaughter. Her name is Sophie. She is Emmett's daughter from his first marriage. She's 24, lives in Atlanta, works at a healthcare nonprofit. Sophie and I have always been close in that easy, uncomplicated way that sometimes skips a generation. She came to visit me once a month when she could, called every Sunday without fail, and had, over the past year, grown very quiet on the phone whenever I mentioned life at the house. I had not told her what was happening. I hadn't wanted to put her in the middle. But that night I told her everything. There was a long silence when I finished. Then she said, "Grandma, I know." I asked her what she meant. She said that 2 months ago, Emmett had called her, not to talk, but to ask if she thought I would be willing to add him to the deed of the house, that Rochelle had suggested it would make things simpler, that Sophia told him she thought it was a terrible idea and he should leave my finances alone, that he had gotten defensive, and they hadn't spoken much since. I sat in my bedroom in the dark, holding the phone. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. She said, "I was afraid you'd think I was making trouble." We were both quiet for a moment. Then I told her she didn't have to worry about that anymore. I told her I had been to see Margaret. I told her I was fine. She cried a little. Not dramatically. Just the kind of crying that happens when you've been holding something for a while and someone finally tells you it's okay to put it down. I told Emmett on a Sunday morning, not at the table. I asked him to come sit with me on the back porch, where the magnolia tree was, where we used to sit when he was small, and I was trying to explain something important to him, without making it feel like a lecture. He always listened better outside. I told him calmly. I told him what I had done with the attorney and why. I told him what the past 14 months had looked like from where I was sitting. Not accusingly, just honestly. I told him about the pot roast dinner and what it felt like to eat cold pasta at my own table while he sat 10 feet away. He was quiet for a long time. I watched him look at the magnolia tree. I watched him figure something out. He said, "I didn't see it." I said I knew. He said, "I let her." And then he stopped. He didn't finish that sentence, and I didn't need him to. I told him I wasn't asking him to choose. I told him I loved him. I told him that what I needed was for him to be my son, not a person who borrowed against me indefinitely and looked the other way while someone else treated me like an afterthought in my own home. He nodded. His jaw was tight the way it gets when he's trying not to cry. "What happens now?" he asked. I said they were welcome to stay through the end of December, which would give them time to find a place. I said I had a list of apartments in the area in a reasonable price range. I said I would help him think through a realistic budget if he wanted my help. He said he did. We sat there for a while after that, just the two of us on the porch. The magnolia tree was perfectly still. The November air smelled like leaves and something distant, wood smoke maybe, from somewhere down the street. Rochelle was not pleased. She came to me the following Tuesday, composed, with her arms crossed, and told me that she felt I had blindsided them, that she thought we had an understanding, that she had been counting on certain things. I let her finish. Then I said, "I think that's the problem, Rochelle. You were counting on things that were never actually offered." She looked at me for a moment. Then she left the room. I noticed, after that she stopped opening my refrigerator without asking. Small things. But I noticed. They found an apartment in January, a 2-bedroom in a neighborhood south of downtown. Not Mount Pleasant, not the premium zip code, but a good solid place with natural light and a reasonable commute for Emmett. He seemed honestly a little relieved. I think carrying the gap between what they were spending and what they were earning had been wearing on him in ways he hadn't admitted to himself. The week they moved out, I helped Emmett carry boxes to his truck. Rochelle worked mostly on her own, which was fine. When the last load was packed, Emmett stood in the driveway and looked at the house for a moment. He said, "I'm sorry, Mom." I said, "I know you are." I meant it. I didn't say it to make him feel better or worse. I meant it the way you mean something that is both true and finished. Sophie came down the following weekend. We sat on the back porch and I made the good coffee, the kind I only make when it's just me or when someone is visiting who will appreciate it. We had it with the lemon pound cake I'd baked that morning. Walter's mother's recipe, the one I've made so many times the handwritten card it came on is nearly transparent from the oil of my fingers. Sophie sat across from me and looked out at the magnolia tree and said, "This is what this porch is supposed to feel like." I knew exactly what she meant. The yard was quiet. The November light was low and gold, the kind that comes through leaves at an angle and lights up everything it touches. My coffee was in my own mug, poured from my own pot at my own table. No one would walk in and take it without asking. No one would rearrange my kitchen and look at me patiently when I couldn't find things. I was 68 years old and I was sitting in the house I had built and kept and paid for in a yard with a tree that had grown past the roofline, with my granddaughter across the table from me. It felt, very simply, like being home. I have thought a lot since then about what happened and how I let it go on as long as I did. I know why. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who made her son feel unwelcome. I didn't want to be difficult. I had been told so many times in my life, in so many quiet ways, that the most admirable thing a woman could be was accommodating. And I had believed it mostly, for most of my life. What I learned in those 14 months, and especially in that long night before I called Margaret, was that accommodation is not the same as generosity. I was generous with my son because I love him. That was real, but I had confused generosity with erasure, and they are not the same thing at all. Generosity says, "Here's what I have, and I am glad to share it." Erasure says, "Here's what I have, and apparently it belongs to whoever takes it." I had drifted from one into the other without noticing, and it had taken cold pasta at my own table to make it clear. I don't regret helping Emmett. I would do it again, within reason, because he is my son, and I am his mother, and that means something that doesn't expire. But I am done confusing love with unlimited access. Dolores came over for sweet tea last week. We sat on the porch until it got dark. She asked how I was, the real way she asks, not the polite way. I told her I was good. She looked at me for a moment, reading my face the way she has for 30 years, and she said, "You mean it." I said I did. The magnolia tree moved a little in the evening air. The porch light came on automatically, the way it always has. My house was quiet and it was mine, and I was in it, all the way. No part of me set aside or made small or left eating cold pasta. Alone in the kitchen, I was present. I was home. I was, after a long time of forgetting, entirely myself. And that, I think, is what dignity actually feels like. Not something you fight for loudly, just something you quietly refuse to give away. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately. Not in a complicated way, just the plain, simple version of it. The version that says, what you allow shapes what continues. What you don't name keeps growing. What you give away without a second thought eventually includes yourself. I allowed things for 14 months. Small things mostly. A carton of orange juice. A reorganized pantry. A grocery bill that doubled. None of it catastrophic on its own. But I've learned that the erosion of a person's dignity rarely happens in one dramatic moment. It happens the way a shoreline wears away, quietly, gradually, one small wave at a time, until one day you look down and the ground you are standing on is simply gone. The cold pasta was my shoreline moment. Sitting at my own dining table, eating alone, watching the steam rise from their plates through the doorway. That was when I finally understood what I had let happen. Not what they had done to me. What I had let happen. That distinction matters. It's the difference between being a victim of circumstances and being an honest witness to your own choices. I don't say that to be hard on myself. I say it because I think it's the only truthful place to stand if you want to actually change something. Emmett didn't become careless overnight. Rochelle didn't walk into my kitchen and take over because she's a monster. These things happened because I kept opening the door and calling it love, and nobody ever had a reason to question it. The intelligence I'm most grateful for is not the kind that solves problems quickly. It's the kind that finally gets quiet enough to see them clearly. That Friday morning before I called Margaret, I sat at my kitchen table with a piece of paper and I wrote things down. Just facts, numbers, dates, what had come in and what had gone out and what remained. That act of writing, of making the invisible visible, was more clarifying than any argument I could have had, any confrontation I could have forced. Truth laid out plainly on paper doesn't require a raised voice. And then there's what Sophie showed me. She had known about the deed conversation for 2 months and carried it alone because she was afraid of causing trouble. We had both been doing the same thing, protecting everyone else's comfort at the expense of our own peace. When she told me, and I told her I'd already handled it, something released in both of us. That's what happens when one person in a family decides to stop pretending. It gives everyone else permission to exhale. Emmett said he didn't see it. I believed him. That's not an excuse. Not seeing is still a choice, eventually, but it's also not the whole story. He was caught between two people he loved, and he took the path of least resistance for as long as it was available to him. When I removed that path, not with anger, but with clear, quiet action, he had to find his footing. And he did. That's the part that gives me the most peace. Not that I protected my house, not the trust documents or the new account, but that Sunday morning on the porch, under the magnolia tree, when my son looked at me and said, "I'm sorry," and I could tell he meant it in the deep way, the way that actually changes a person. That was the real resolution. Not a legal one, a human one. I'm 68 years old. I have learned that strength is rarely loud. The loudest thing I did in this entire story was sit at a kitchen table before sunrise and write down what was true. Everything else followed from that.